Own your voice, and you begin to own your life. Not because your voice is loud, clever, or decorated with fancy words, but because it's anchored, because it carries belief, because it refuses to flinch. Leadership begins at that moment. Not when you get a title, not when someone finally gives you permission, but when your words become something people feel. There's a difference between noise and voice. Noise is everywhere. Voice is rare. And your voice only becomes real when you stop outsourcing it. When you no longer say what's safe or repeat what others think you should. When you start owning every sentence, every pause, every ounce of what you say. That's when people notice. That's when they lean in. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence made them want to. You don't get to that place by accident. You get there by making a decision that every time you speak, it's going to count. You stop guessing. You stop performing. You speak because you've lived it. You speak because it matters. Pause for a second and look around. Wherever you are right now, what time is it? What city are you listening from? Really, take a breath and comment where you are. Anchor yourself, because this isn't entertainment. This is about how you show up next time you speak. It's about learning how to lead with something as invisible and as undeniable as your voice. Now, picture someone standing at the edge of a conference table. Their team is restless. Stakes are high. All eyes on them. If their voice trembles, the room loses confidence. But if their tone is calm, firm, settled, the room aligns. Not because of PowerPoints, because of presence. That kind of presence comes from owning every word you say. No apologies. No padding. Just truth. We speak every day, but few of us own it. Most people speak halfway. I think, maybe, I guess. But halfway never moves anything. Halfway doesn't shift minds. Halfway doesn't inspire trust. If your words don't sound like you believe them, no one else will. Confidence in speech isn't about volume. It's about alignment. When your words match your beliefs, your tone steadies. Your back straightens. You stop second-guessing. Your sentences tighten. That's not arrogance. It's certainty. And certainty isn't noise. It's earned. Earned through reflection, preparation, experience. When you've done the work, when your life and voice aren't at odds, then confidence becomes your natural state. You're not trying to impress. You're just delivering something real. Muhammad Ali once said, "I am the greatest." Not because he needed to convince you, but because he'd trained, he'd bled. He believed it so deeply that the world couldn't ignore him. That's the kind of ownership we're talking about. Not arrogance, but conviction rooted in work. And here's something else. When your words and your life don't match, it shows. Eventually, people notice the gap. Your tone gets shaky. Your presence dims. That's the cost of speaking what you don't stand for. But when your actions back your voice, you don't need to perform. Your life does the talking for you. Own your voice also means stop apologizing for your truth. Too many people shrink their message to keep others comfortable. They dilute their conviction so they don't sound too much. But leaders aren't here to be liked. They're here to be clear, and clarity demands courage. You don't have to be rude, but you must be firm. You must mean it. When you walk into a room, the room should feel it. Not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. People can sense when someone isn't guessing their way through life. They feel the weight of decisions already made. Look at someone like Brené Brown. Her voice doesn't boom, but when she speaks, It's steady. It's clear. It's owned. Because she's lived it. She's examined it. That's what gives her words gravity. You don't need big gestures when you're rooted in truth. And don't underestimate silence. Weak speakers rush to fill every pause. They fear the quiet. But confident communicators use silence like punctuation. You say something meaningful. You pause. You let it land. That pause is power. That pause says, I said what I needed to say. Your voice is a tool, not a crutch. You don't speak to prove you're smart. You don't talk to look important. You speak to serve. You speak to lead. And when your voice is used like that, everything shifts. The tone deepens. The intention sharpens. The need to perform fades. This is the voice of a leader. Clear, steady, firm. Not perfect. Not polished. Just true. And here's what happens when you own your words. Your space shifts. People start reacting differently. They listen longer. They interrupt less. They remember more. Because now, you're not just sounding like a leader. You are one, and you don't need permission for that. You don't wait until someone appoints you. You appoint yourself. You don't speak for applause. You speak from alignment. This is the beginning of something different, something deeper. From now on, you don't throw words into the air and hope they stick. You say what you mean. You mean what you say. And you take full responsibility for how it lands. That's what it means to own your voice. Because once you do, you start owning your impact. And that sets the foundation for the next level. Because if people can't understand what you're saying, all that power is lost. That's why clarity is everything. And clarity is what we step into next. Clarity is leadership's first real language. Without it, power dissolves into noise. Influence turns into confusion. And trust? It doesn't even begin. People don't follow ideas they don't understand. They don't rally behind leaders whose words are vague. If you want to lead, the first thing you owe any room is clarity. Most people think being impressive means being complicated. They think the more they say, the smarter they sound. But true communicators know the opposite is true. Power lives in simplicity. Influence lives in precision. You don't need to say more. You need to say it better. One clear sentence can cut deeper than 10 clever ones. One direct message can move a team more than a 30-minute speech padded with fluff. People don't remember the long-winded. They remember the clear. Think about Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. 2 minutes, 272 words. And it shaped a nation's soul. Not because it was long, but because every word carried purpose. No noise, no filler, just truth. And that's your task. Not to impress, but to express. Not to sound smart, but to be understood. Because when people understand you, they trust you. And when they trust you, they listen. And when they listen, things happen. But if your message isn't landing, none of that follows. You could have the best ideas in the world, but if they're buried under vague terms and scattered thoughts, they vanish before they even touch the listener. You don't get influence through volume. You get it through clarity. So how do you speak clearly? First, slow down. Fast talk often comes from insecurity. People speed up when they don't feel certain. But rushing your words robs them of impact. It blurs your message. It tells your audience, I don't value this enough to let it breathe. Slow speech shows confidence. It gives weight to your words. It gives people time to catch up. And it signals, I'm not in a hurry. What I'm saying matters. Next, cut the clutter. If you can say it in 5 words, don't use 15. Extra words aren't harmless. They dilute your message. They confuse your listener. And they exhaust attention spans. Don't decorate your speech, deliver it. People tune out when your sentences wander. They disconnect when you loop. They stop trusting you when they can't follow you. And when attention leaves, leadership leaves. Speak in straight lines. Choose one point. Land it. Then move forward. That's clarity. Avoid technical jargon unless it's essential. And if you use it, explain it. Speak in language your audience understands. Speak to them, not at them. Think about a coach in a high-pressure moment. They don't say, "Let's revisit the broader theoretical strategy and integrate synergistic motion." No. They say, "Get to the left, cut in, take the shot." Short, sharp, clear. And it works because it gets through. Another key to clarity: be specific. Vague words kill momentum. Phrases like, "Let's do better," or "We need to improve," mean nothing without detail. Say exactly what needs to change. Say what better looks like. Spell it out, because if you don't define the path, people wander. Leadership requires direction, and direction begins in language. Also, watch your tone. You can say the right words with the wrong tone and still lose your message. You can say, "I believe in you," with a flat, distracted voice, and it falls dead. Or you can say it with presence, with certainty, and it lands like a push forward. Tone is your emotional clarity. It carries what words can't. And when tone and message align, people feel the truth behind the sentence. Another habit that weakens clarity: over-explaining. Some people bury their main point under 3 analogies, 5 side notes, and 2 just-in-case explanations. And the message disappears. Don't talk in circles. Don't build fences around your point. Trust your idea enough to say it clean. Then stop. Silence can do more than repetition. Say it once. Say it clearly. Say it with intention. Then let the listener breathe. And don't fear repeating your key message once, but not 5 times. Repetition isn't a lack of clarity. It's reinforcement. If done with discipline, not desperation. Clarity also shows up in body language. If your words say, "I'm confident," but your posture says, "I want to disappear," people believe your posture. Stand tall. Face your listener. Don't fidget. Don't fold your arms. Your body must echo your voice. Every signal you send is part of your message. And if those signals conflict, people trust none of them. Now here's a real-world example. Steve Jobs. Whether on stage or in interviews, he spoke clearly, simply, cleanly. He didn't need buzzwords or dramatic gestures. His power came from structure, from clarity, from certainty. He made the complex understandable. And that's what leadership demands. Practice matters too. Clarity isn't born, it's built. Every casual conversation is training. Every meeting is rehearsal. Every time you open your mouth, you're either sharpening your edge or dulling it. Start noticing how often you ramble. Start noticing your filler words. I guess. These erode your credibility. Trim them, one by one. Speak with purpose. End your sentences cleanly. Let your silence carry strength. Clarity means you respect your audience's time. You don't flood them with fluff. You give them what they need, then stop. It means you respect your own voice. You've thought through your message before speaking. You don't wander in real time trying to discover it. You deliver it. Because when your thinking is clear, your speaking is sharp. And when your message is sharp, people remember. They carry your words with them. They quote you. They repeat you. Because your message wasn't a sound. It was a signal. So don't chase cleverness. Chase clarity. Speak so no one leaves confused. Speak like someone who has something worth saying. Speak like someone who's done the work to make their ideas land. Because once people understand you, they begin to trust you. And trust, as we'll see next, isn't built on noise. It's built on steadiness, on control. That's why in the next section, we shift from words to tone, from message to presence. Because if your voice shakes, so does your leadership. Leadership doesn't begin when you raise your voice. It begins when your voice stops trembling, when it no longer shifts with your emotions, when it becomes steady, no matter the room, no matter the pressure. Because your voice is more than air and sound. It's the outward expression of your inner world. People don't just hear your words, they feel your state. You could say all the right things, quote the best advice, repeat polished mantras, but if your voice sounds unsure, rushed, or erratic, your message loses its grip. People won't follow uncertainty. They follow calm. They follow control. Leadership isn't always about speaking first. It's about being heard when you do. And no one hears someone whose voice wavers like a leaf in the wind. So before you try to lead others, learn to lead yourself through your tone, your rhythm, your emotional presence. It starts with awareness. Most people never truly hear themselves. They don't know if they speak too fast, too soft, too flat, or too sharp. They've never recorded themselves, never paid attention to how their message lands, not just in content, but in tone. If you want to lead, you have to listen to your own delivery. Record a conversation. Play it back. Would you trust that voice? Would you follow that energy? If not, now you know where to begin. Voice control is emotional control. A leader who can't manage their tone can't manage a room. It's that simple. Think of President Obama during crisis speeches. Calm, measured, grounded. His presence was steady even when the world wasn't. That's leadership. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. People don't just need information, they need assurance. And that assurance lives in your voice. Steadiness doesn't come from performance. It comes from preparation. When you've thought through your words, you don't have to scramble. When your values are clear, your tone becomes stable. When your emotions are anchored, your message carries weight. Untrained voices reveal everything. Frustration, fear, desperation. You can't hide it. And if you lead from that place, people pick up on it instantly. They may nod politely, but they won't commit. Because your presence didn't create safety, it created tension. Controlled voices lead calm rooms. And here's what most overlook. Control doesn't mean flat. It doesn't mean robotic. It means composed. You can still be passionate, still be energized, but your energy is directed, not scattered. It doesn't leak into panic or desperation. This is why breath matters. Breath is the foundation of vocal control. Shallow breathing creates tight speech, shaky delivery, and rushed pacing. Deep, deliberate breathing grounds you. It lowers anxiety. It slows your tempo. And it gives your voice richness and depth. Before every key conversation, breathe. Before every meeting, center. Before every decision, pause. That space, that control, is what makes your voice land. And let's be honest, most people talk to prove themselves. They raise their voice when they're challenged. They speed up when they feel judged. But leaders don't do that. Leaders don't prove. They guide. Their words don't chase approval. Their tone doesn't beg to be liked. They speak because they have something that matters, and they deliver it without apology. They don't rush to defend. They don't fill silence with nervous chatter. They use stillness as punctuation. Their control is a presence all its own. Here's a truth. If your tone changes every time your emotions shift, people will stop trusting you. Because you're unpredictable. And unpredictability creates anxiety. People follow what they can count on. If you show up calm today, but explosive tomorrow, your team walks on eggshells. They guess your mood before they hear your message. That's not leadership. That's instability. Strong leaders train for consistency. They rehearse their delivery. Not to fake it, but to refine it. They don't rely on charisma alone. They build the habit of clarity under pressure. Just like athletes train muscles, leaders train tone. Imagine Serena Williams walking onto center court. Her movements aren't accidental. They're deliberate, practiced, built through repetition. Your voice needs that same discipline, because the high-stakes moments don't announce themselves. They arrive suddenly. And when they do, your voice will either rise or collapse. And you don't want to build confidence in real time. You want it ready. And here's something even more powerful. Silence. A strong voice knows when not to speak. Impulsive words cause damage. Overreactions create chaos. A leader who talks too much out of emotion digs holes they later have to climb out of. But a leader who pauses, who listens, who holds silence with grace, earns more respect than any shouted opinion. Fewer words, more meaning. That's the mark of authority. Think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches. Every pause mattered. Every breath was part of the message. His silence held more than most people's noise. Because leadership isn't about performance, it's about presence. And presence is built when your voice reflects your strength, not your nerves. Now let's talk energy. If your voice lacks energy, your words fall flat. You can't inspire with a dead tone. You can't rally people with flat delivery. You don't need to shout, but you do need to be alive in your speech. Alive doesn't mean loud. It means present, engaged, invested. Your voice should carry belief. It should say, "This matters." If it doesn't sound like it matters to you, it won't matter to anyone else. That's why discipline is the secret. You can't rely on mood. You have to rely on training. Because some days you'll be tired. Some days you won't feel strong. But your voice must be. It must hold. It must rise. Not artificially, but faithfully. You've practiced. You've refined. You've shown up. So even when your energy dips, your voice doesn't. And that's where real leadership begins to take shape. Not in theory, but in rhythm, in repetition, in the tone you show up with when no one's watching. Your voice isn't just part of you. It represents you. People hear it before they know your values, before they know your intent. So train it, shape it, guard it. Because if your voice can stay calm when the world gets loud, if it can remain grounded when emotions rise, if it can speak with truth when others fold, then you've already begun to lead. Not by shouting, not by overpowering, but by guiding. That's why next, we move from tone to influence, from control to impact. Because the next level isn't just sounding strong. It's speaking in a way that makes people act. Words are everywhere, but few words move people. Fewer still move people to act. Leadership isn't just about sounding good. It's not about saying the right things or offering agreeable opinions. It's about saying what needs to be said in a way that gets people to stop delaying, stop hiding, and start moving. Action is the real proof of communication. You can talk all day, but if nothing changes, if no one shifts, stands up, or steps forward, then all you did was fill the air. A leader's words don't just inform, they transform. They make people feel seen, understood, called out, and called up. But that kind of language doesn't come from trying to impress. It comes from intention. From speaking with a purpose that presses into people's discomfort, just enough to wake them up without breaking their spirit. The real shift happens when you stop trying to inspire with empty elevation and instead start speaking into the exact resistance someone's carrying. If someone's stuck in excuses, your words name it. If they're caught in delay, your voice presses urgency. If they're drowning in doubt, your tone cuts through and offers clarity. A leader moves people. That is the job. Think of Winston Churchill during the darkest days of World War II. He didn't say, "Let's stay positive and hope things work out." He said, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender." It moved a nation from despair to defiance, because it wasn't just a speech. It was a command to stand. That's the weight your voice must learn to carry. Not because of drama, but because of depth. And here's the secret. People aren't waiting for motivation. They're waiting for permission to change, to want more, to believe they can demand better of themselves. Most people are surrounded by soft talk, polite advice, vague encouragement. But what they need is someone to look them in the eye, metaphorically or literally, and say, "You've waited long enough. It's time." Not from arrogance, but from truth. The truth wakes people up. It stings a little, but it also frees. It confronts the comfort they've been hiding in. It dismantles the lies they've told themselves. It opens a door and dares them to walk through it. But you don't deliver that truth with cruelty. You deliver it with clarity. You say, "This isn't working." You say, "You've been playing small." You say, "You're capable of more, and it's time to act like it." One sentence like that, spoken clean, sharp, and real, can change someone's life trajectory. That's what powerful speaking does. It interrupts. But it must be real. It must come from your own standard. You can't ask others to act on truths you're not living. If your voice says, "Be disciplined," but your life says otherwise, people feel it, and your influence breaks. Your message must match your model. Your words gain power when they come from your walk, not just your wisdom. This is why authenticity isn't optional. It's foundational. Because people are tired of being talked at. They're craving words that were earned through fire, not Googled for effect. So speak from your scars. Speak from your failures. Speak from what you had to learn the hard way. That's where your authority is. When you say, "This is how I got unstuck," they'll listen. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And let's not forget this. The form of your words matters too. Short, sharp, straight. If you drag your point through too many examples, you bury the spark. Clarity becomes fog. You don't need 5 metaphors. You need one good sentence, delivered right. Then silence. Let the truth breathe. Let it echo. People don't act on clutter. They act on clean. And urgency? It matters. People don't move without a reason to move now. They say later to almost everything. Your job is to show them why later is a lie. Why delay costs more than action. Why staying the same is often the most dangerous decision they could make. So don't talk in future tense. Talk in present pull. This matters now. Here's what's at stake. Do it today. Create pressure, not panic. Pressure based in truth, in clarity, in consequences. Because when people understand what it will cost to stay stuck, they start taking movement seriously. And watch your language. If your message is too polished, too theatrical, too slogan-heavy, it dies. People tune out. They assume it's for someone else. But if you speak in language that sounds like them, you connect. You say what they've been thinking but couldn't say. You name what they feel but have been afraid to voice. That moment, that's when you earn their shift. You don't need perfect grammar. You need presence. You need belief behind your delivery. You need to mean it, not with hype, but with grounded truth. Now, here's where this gets practical. Want people to act? Give them clear direction, not vague inspiration. Don't say, "Take control of your life." Say, "Make the call today. Write the email. Sign up for the class." Specific steps lead to action. Vague talk leads to indecision. And once you've said it, don't soften it. Don't layer it with disclaimers. Let the challenge land. The point of leadership is not comfort, it's movement. And sometimes, the thing that moves people most is confrontation. Gentle, clear, true. You say, "You've been hiding." You say, "You've got more in you." You say, "Stop waiting, start." The room may go quiet. That's good. That silence? That means it hit. And don't mistake silence for rejection. It's processing. That pause means your words didn't just touch ears, they touched the center. You don't need to keep talking. Let the shift happen inside them. And here's the final point. Your job is not to be liked. It's to be useful. If people don't clap, that's fine. If they don't smile, that's fine. If they move, that's the win. Because leadership is not about applause, it's about action. So speak like someone who refuses to waste words. Speak like someone who's felt what it means to be stuck, and now stands as a mirror, a push, a voice that says, "You don't have to stay there." Speak with urgency. Speak with direction. Speak with something at stake. And when you do, they will move. And that's when we talk about how they remember you. Not just in the moment, but days, weeks, even years later. Because next, we speak not just to act, but to echo. Being heard is easy. Being remembered is rare. Anyone can say something clever. Anyone can give a decent speech. But few people say something that stays, something that echoes, something that changes how others think, even when the voice is long gone. That's the mark of leadership communication. Not noise, not length, but resonance. You don't want your words to just land. You want them to linger. Because people forget most things, but they remember what moves them. They remember what makes them pause. They remember what rings in their head days later when the crowd is gone. The noise is quiet, and they're left with a decision. To speak like a leader is to plant seeds, not all of which grow instantly, but many of which stick. So what makes your words unforgettable? It starts with one thing, meaning what you say, not kind of, not halfway. You must speak from belief, not performance. Speak like your voice is a signature, one that leaves an imprint. And how do you do that? You cut the noise. No filler, no fluff, no trying to sound smart. Just say what needs to be said. Say it simply. Say it clean. Because the easier it is to remember, the harder it is to forget. Remember the phrase, "I have a dream"? Short, simple, immortal. Dr. King didn't use a thesaurus. He used vision, truth, conviction. That's why his words still live. You don't need poetic talent. You need honesty. You need to say what matters in a way that doesn't need to be translated. And don't overqualify your message. Every maybe, every kind of, every "I just think" weakens the weight. Strong speech is unapologetic. Not harsh, not loud, just certain. Because certainty is magnetic. Certainty is remembered. If you're unsure of your message, they'll be unsure too. But if you've lived it, if it's been tested in your life, then it becomes more than words. It becomes a story, a standard, a line that separates the talkers from the walkers. People remember words that come from truth. And truth isn't flashy. It's felt. So speak like someone who isn't just trying to sound good. Speak like someone who's walked the long road, who's failed, who's rebuilt, who knows the cost of confusion and the power of clarity. Speak like someone who remembers what it feels like to be stuck and wants no one else to stay there. Speak like someone who respects the opportunity to say something real. The second thing that makes words stick is structure. If your message meanders, people forget it. But when your idea is clean, when it has a sharp beginning, a driving middle, and a crisp close, it becomes easy to carry. And when something's easy to carry, people carry it with them. A good idea, well phrased, can go further than any business card, and people share what they remember. That's when your voice spreads. It's not how many people you talk to that builds reach. It's how sticky your words are. So ask yourself, could someone repeat what I just said? Could they summarize it in one line? Could they share it in a conversation tomorrow? If not, refine it. Because leaders don't just drop thoughts, they deliver anchors. The third quality of memorable speech is emotion without manipulation. You don't need theatrics, but you do need to care. Your voice must show that what you're saying matters to you, and that you believe it matters to them. People don't remember data, they remember emotion. They remember how you made them feel. They remember if your voice made them stop. They remember if your sentence hit a nerve. And when you combine truth, plus structure, plus emotion, your voice starts to carry. It shows up in people's minds days later. It shapes how they talk to others. It gives them new language, and that new language creates new possibilities. And here's a deeper layer. People don't just want to be impressed. They want to be elevated. Don't speak just to sound smart. Speak to make them stronger. Give them a way of thinking they didn't have before. Give them a phrase they can lean on. Give them something to say to themselves in hard moments. That's how your voice becomes useful. Think of someone you still quote. Maybe a teacher, a mentor, a parent. You don't remember every word, but there's a phrase, a sentence, a moment that changed you. That's what you're aiming for. You're not here to fill space. You're here to shift something inside someone, and to do it in as few words as possible. One clear sentence with weight is worth more than pages of well-meaning noise. One moment of real clarity can turn someone's entire season around. But that moment must be earned. It must come from preparation, not improvisation. It must come from integrity, not technique. You don't need to be flashy. You need to be grounded. So speak less often. But when you do, say something that lives. Let your voice be the one they think about in traffic, on the treadmill, at 3 a.m. when they're questioning everything. Because those are the moments that leadership echoes into. You speak once, but your voice echoes when it's built on clarity, shaped by truth, and delivered with steadiness. So don't speak like someone who needs attention. Speak like someone whose message is worth remembering. Because the real test of communication isn't applause. It's retention. Do they repeat your words? Do they quote your challenge? Do they carry your voice into the hard moments? If the answer is yes, you've done your job. And if you want to make that impact consistently, you can't leave it to chance. You have to train your voice like a muscle. You have to make your delivery sharp even when you're tired. And that's where we go next. Because your voice doesn't become powerful by accident. It becomes powerful through discipline. Powerful voices are not born. They're trained, sculpted, repeated, refined. And that training doesn't happen on a stage. It happens in the quiet moments no one sees. In daily conversations, in self-correction, in how you ask for your coffee, in how you give feedback to your team. It happens in your posture, your breath, your awareness. Because the truth is, your voice is a tool. And like any tool, if it's not sharpened, it rusts. But there's something else, something more dangerous. It's not just that most people don't train their voice. It's that they actively weaken it. Every day. With the language of hesitation, the speech of doubt, the vocabulary of smallness. Weak talk is a habit built from fear. And fear wears many masks. I hope, I guess, I just think. This might be dumb, but each one slices a little more credibility from your voice. And the worst part? You don't even notice you're doing it. It becomes part of your rhythm. You say sorry before a sentence, as if apologizing for having a thought. You lead with disclaimers. You pad your point. And by the time you finally get to the message, no one is listening. You've buried the power under layers of protection. Here's the truth. If you keep speaking from weakness, you will become weak. Not because your ideas aren't good, but because your delivery tells the room, I'm not sure I believe myself, and if you don't believe your words, no one else will. But this can be unlearned. You can train your voice to reflect strength, not arrogance, not aggression, but clarity and conviction. It starts with awareness. Notice the phrases that drain your power. Catch yourself when you soften your stance to avoid discomfort. Hear the hesitation. Then cut it. Sharpen the edge. Speak straight. Instead of, I just wanted to say it. Instead of, I hope this makes sense, say what you mean. Instead of, sorry, but stop apologizing for having a spine. This isn't about being cold. It's about being solid. Strong voices don't shout. They don't ramble. They don't ask for permission. They own the space they occupy. Think of someone like Angela Merkel. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but her voice carried weight. Why? Because it was clean, grounded, steady. No unnecessary words, no inflated performance, just precise communication backed by conviction. That's power. You don't need to dominate a room. You just need to be rooted. And that rooting starts inside. So let's go deeper. Why do people speak with weak language? Because they're afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of being wrong, afraid of being disliked. And so they protect themselves with soft words, with filler, with apologies and disclaimers. But leadership is not about avoiding offense. It's about moving things forward. And movement requires friction. It requires pressure. It requires clarity. So you have to decide, do you want to be liked or do you want to be effective? Because you can't always be both. You can speak gently, but you must also speak clearly. And that clarity will, at times, create discomfort. That's okay. That's what leadership does. You are not here to fit in. You are here to cut through. So drop the weak talk and speak like someone who understands the power of a single, undiluted sentence. A sentence like, this needs to change, or that's not acceptable, or here's what must happen next. These are not cruel words. These are leadership words. Words that move, words that challenge, words that shift the atmosphere in a room. You will never speak with strength if you always lead with comfort. And here's something else you need to know. Strong talk creates presence. People listen longer. They interrupt less. They take your message seriously because it sounds like you take it seriously. You don't need approval. You need clarity. And clarity is built through practice. So practice in every conversation. Cut one soft phrase at a time. Replace maybe with I believe. Replace I guess with here's what I see. Replace I hope with I will. These small shifts aren't small. They're a full rewrite of your internal operating system. And over time, your voice changes. You walk into rooms differently. You stop bracing for judgment. You start delivering insight. And when people push back, you don't collapse. You hold the line. Because your voice no longer depends on their reaction. It depends on your standard. That's what strength sounds like. It's not louder. It's not longer. It's cleaner. You say what you mean, and you stop. No repetition, no padding, just one solid line and silence. That silence, it carries your point. Because when your message is strong, you don't need to dress it up. You don't need to say it 3 different ways. You don't need to tell 5 stories. You say it once, then let it breathe. Now, here's a challenge. Listen to your next 3 conversations. Count how many times you weaken your own message. Notice the justs, the maybes, the I don't knows. Then rewrite them. Practice the rewrite out loud. Make your voice a mirror of your intent. And when you've trained that habit, when you've cleaned the clutter, cut the weak phrases, and tightened your tone, you will no longer sound like a leader. You will become one. You'll stand in conversations with gravity. You'll deliver ideas with finality. And people will feel it. They won't always agree, but they will always respect you. Because strong talk earns attention. It earns trust. It earns follow-through. Weak talk wastes time. Strong talk builds legacy. And this doesn't mean you lose empathy. In fact, empathy becomes stronger when it's spoken clearly, when it's delivered with presence, when the person on the other side knows exactly what you mean, because you didn't bury it. So speak to serve, not to protect your image. Speak with care, but with backbone. Speak like your words matter, because they do. And once you've trained that voice, the next challenge will test you even more. Because it's one thing to speak with strength when no one pushes back. It's another to hold your ground when they do. Anyone can speak with strength when the room is quiet. Anyone can sound confident when there's no pushback. But leadership doesn't reveal itself when it's easy. It shows up when things get uncomfortable. The real test of your voice isn't when people agree with you. It's when they don't. Because the moment you say something worth standing on, resistance will arrive. Someone will challenge your tone, question your logic, twist your words, test your patience, push your boundaries. And what you do in that moment determines whether your voice holds weight or crumbles. Weak voices retreat. They soften the message. They backpedal. They over-explain. Strong voices hold. Not with arrogance, not with aggression, with presence. They stay grounded, unshaken, anchored in clarity. They don't need to overpower. They don't need to shout. They don't need to win. Because truth doesn't shout, it stands. If your voice changes every time someone raises an eyebrow, you haven't earned trust. You've borrowed it. And borrowed trust disappears under pressure. This is why the internal work matters. You can't copy confidence. You can't imitate certainty. It has to be yours, built through repetition, built through choosing to speak when it's hard, built through staying composed when others try to throw you off center. That kind of voice doesn't come from charisma. It comes from consistency. If you want to lead, you must decide, before the tension comes, what you stand for. Because if you don't know, pressure will expose the gap. You'll fold. You'll hesitate. You'll change your language to fit the mood of the room. And when you do, you lose respect. Not because you're wrong, but because you're inconsistent. People respect what holds. Even when they disagree, they trust a message that doesn't wobble. Think of Rosa Parks. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She sat and said no. That single act, backed by steady conviction, echoed around the world. That's what it means to hold your ground. Because leadership isn't about making noise. It's about making decisions that stand. But let's be clear. Holding your ground doesn't mean you're stubborn. It means you've thought it through. It means you don't speak based on who's watching or who's reacting. You speak from a place of alignment. And that alignment creates gravity. So when someone questions you, you don't panic. You don't flinch. You don't match their emotion. You maintain your tone. And that steadiness disarms the room. Because people are used to defensiveness. They're used to escalation. But when you stay still, stay calm, stay clear, that's when your voice becomes a mirror. It shows the other person their chaos, and it doesn't absorb it. Some people push not because they care, but because they want to control. They raise objections to test your footing, and when you wobble, they know you weren't ready. But when your voice stays planted, without sarcasm, without panic, without needing to explain yourself 10 different ways, they feel something different. They feel trust. That's how authority is built. Not with popularity, not with applause, but with stability. You say the same thing when it's hard that you said when it was easy. Your tone doesn't shift when someone rolls their eyes. Your message doesn't bend when someone challenges your confidence. You stay right where you are. That's presence, and it earns something more important than approval. It earns respect. But don't expect resistance to always be loud. Sometimes it's subtle, a smirk, a dismissive question, a passive-aggressive comment, a carefully crafted silence designed to unnerve you. You don't meet subtle attacks with emotional flinching. You don't scramble. You anchor. You breathe. You stay composed. You respond with facts, not feelings. Not because you're cold, but because you're prepared. You've built this voice for moments exactly like this, because you knew they'd come. And here's the gift of opposition. Every time someone challenges you and you don't fold, your voice becomes stronger. Not louder, stronger. You gain more than ground. You gain trust. First in yourself, then in others. Because you're no longer performing. You're rooted. You speak from decisions made, not reactions formed on the spot. And people begin to recognize that. They stop testing you. They start following you because you've shown them. I don't move every time the room does, and that's rare. Most voices are shaped by approval. Most messages are edited by anxiety. Most people live in a loop of say what keeps the peace. But leadership doesn't keep the peace. It builds it through clarity, through truth, through consistency. So when the room turns, you don't. When tension rises, you don't. You stay centered, and in that stillness, you lead. Not because you convinced everyone, but because you stood. Standing is leadership's first action. Standing in a meeting, standing in a disagreement, standing in your truth. Even when the voice shakes slightly, even when you're the only one, even when it's inconvenient. Because there's a quiet kind of power in being unbothered. Not emotionally numb, but emotionally disciplined. People notice that. It sets you apart. Because in a world full of reactivity, calm becomes magnetic. And in that calm, people stop listening to your words and start trusting your presence. That's influence. That's earned. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes natural. You don't just speak strongly, you live strong, and your voice reflects it. So from now on, when someone tries to shake you, don't mirror their chaos. Reflect your clarity. Don't raise your voice. Raise your standard. Don't overtalk. Hold your ground. Because holding your ground isn't about resistance. It's about integrity. And when integrity leads the way, people follow without being asked. And now that you've anchored your voice in clarity, steadiness, and truth, it's time to refine it even more. Because strong speech isn't just about content or courage. It's about efficiency. Say what needs to be said, and stop. That's where we go next. Leadership is not measured by how much you say. It's measured by how well you say it. The difference isn't in the volume. It's in the discipline. Because in a world full of talking, the one who speaks with sharp clarity becomes the one who cuts through, the one who makes others pause, the one who is remembered. That doesn't happen by saying more. It happens by saying what matters and stopping. This is the habit every strong communicator must build. Speak the message, then shut your mouth. Too many people believe that the longer they talk, the more credible they sound. But the opposite is true. The more you talk, the more you risk diluting the message. Every extra word is a possible distraction. Every added example is a potential detour. Every repeated point becomes a reason for the listener to check out. If you want to lead, you need to tighten. Because the moment people feel like you're wasting their time, they stop giving you their attention. And attention, in this world, is currency. If you lose it, you lose your influence. So how do you earn it? By getting to the point, fast. Imagine this. You're in a high-stakes meeting. Everyone's time is limited. Tension is high. You have something important to say. You stand up and say it in one clean, direct line. No fluff, no warming up, no drifting. You land the message, and then you sit back down. That moment, that silence after, that's when people listen, because you respected their attention. And in doing so, you commanded it. Most communicators fill space, but leaders create impact. It's not about how much you can say, it's about how much the room can retain. And they retain less the longer you go. So speak in strikes. Say the point once, clearly. Then stop. Don't over-explain. Don't circle back. Don't keep adding. That's not clarity. That's insecurity. Over-explaining is the symptom of self-doubt. You're not sure they'll get it, so you say it 3 more ways. You're not confident in the message, so you surround it with verbal padding. But trust this, if your message is clear, it doesn't need repetition. It needs breathing room. And when you stop talking, the idea settles. That's the moment when people think, when the words hit, when transformation begins. You don't have to fill the space. You just have to frame it right, and then let it echo. 1 sentence, then silence. Think of it like this. If your message can't stand on its own, it's not ready. Keep refining. Trim the edges. Ask yourself, what's the simplest way I can say this? If you can't say it in 1 sentence, you probably don't understand it well enough yet. And leadership requires understanding, first of self, then of others. Now let's talk about pace. When you slow down, your words gain weight. When you pause, your message sharpens. When you stop speaking, your presence lingers. Fast talking screams nervousness. Rambling signals doubt. Sharp pacing shows control. Control is trust. So pause more. Let your sentences breathe. You don't need to rush to prove yourself. The moment you stop trying to fill time, you start earning respect. And let's not ignore structure. Start strong, stay sharp, end clean. No loops, no detours, no wandering off topic. 1 message, 1 sentence at a time. No wasted motion. Think of your words like tools, not ornaments. Every sentence should do something, build something, move something forward. If it doesn't, cut it. Don't speak from a place of fear. Speak from a place of clarity. Here's a practice. After you say something, ask yourself, did I just make that clearer or just longer? Train your speech like an athlete trains their movement. Efficient, powerful, focused. Brevity is not weakness. Brevity is leadership. People trust the voice that says what it means. Once, that voice gets remembered. That voice becomes the one others quote. The more certain you are, the fewer words you need. If you've done the thinking, you don't need to explain. You don't need to stack arguments. You just deliver and stop. Think of Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone. Not a long speech, not a storm of features, just clarity. An iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is 1 device. Boom, that's a leader who knows how to land. You don't need 10 examples. You need 1 that sticks. You don't need 5 metaphors. You need 1 sentence that doesn't budge. The power is in the precision. Now let's talk ego. A lot of people talk too much because they want to sound impressive. But impressive fades, impact lasts. You're not speaking to perform. You're speaking to build something. You're not here to fill minutes. You're here to shift minds. So stop trying to be admired. Be understood. Admiration fades. Understanding drives action. Speak to be useful. Speak with intent. And know this. When you speak well, people will lean in. Not because you said a lot, but because you said something clean, then let it land. That's when they respect you more. That's when they remember you more. That's when they trust you more. Because in a world drowning in noise, the one who stops speaking at the right moment becomes the one who leads. So cut the fluff, trim the layers, sharpen your edges, speak with discipline. Speak like your words have work to do, and let that work happen in silence. Because once you master the art of saying less, the next step is learning to say something they never forget. And that's where we go next. Talking is common. Being remembered is rare. Leadership isn't about how loud your voice is. It's about how deep it lands, how far it travels, how long it stays. And the words that stay, they're the ones that mean something. Not fancy, not poetic, not trendy, just true. If you want to speak like a leader, stop trying to be heard. Start trying to be remembered. Because anyone can fill time, but only a few can shift a room with one sentence. Only a few can say something that echoes days later, weeks later, years later. That's your aim. Not applause, memory, not just attention, retention. The goal isn't for people to think, "That sounded good." The goal is for people to remember what you said when they're alone, when they're facing doubt, when they're at a crossroads. And to speak like that, you have to do two things. Be clear about what you believe, and say it in a way people can carry. Let's break it down. First, speak from conviction. People remember conviction. They remember a voice that means it. They remember the words that don't flinch. They remember when you speak from your center, not from a script. If your message is shaky, your memory won't last. If your voice is soft, vague, uncertain, your words will fade. But if you've lived it, if you've struggled for it, if you've bled through it, then when you speak, people don't just hear it. They feel it. They remember that. Think about Malcolm X. He didn't speak with decoration. He spoke with direction. He didn't speak to charm. He spoke to challenge. And because of that, his words didn't just touch ears. They created movements. That's what memory is built on. Truth with weight. And weight doesn't mean force. It means origin. It means the words came from a place inside you that's been tested. So before you speak, ask, is this something I live or just something I say? Because what you live is what gets remembered. Now let's talk about clarity. People don't remember clutter. They remember simplicity. Not simplistic, clear. Make your message portable. Make it easy to repeat. If your sentence can't be said by someone else later, it's too complicated. Good leaders speak in headlines. Short, punchy, direct. Not because they lack depth, but because they respect attention. People aren't carrying home your whole speech. They're carrying a line, one thought, one phrase, one hook. Make it count. Think of the greatest speeches ever delivered. They all had repeatable essence. Yes, we can. Give me liberty or give me death. Ask not what your country can do for you. We shall overcome. These lines lived because they were clear. And clarity is not a talent. It's a discipline. You don't achieve it by luck. You get there by stripping the unnecessary, by sharpening the language, by refusing to use 10 words when 5 will do. And when you speak like that, people quote you, not because you asked, but because they couldn't help it. Your words became theirs. That's legacy communication. It's not about being impressive. It's about being imprinted. Next, speak from emotional truth. Not performance, not hype, but something that means something to you. People remember the voice that feels. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, but real. If your words are flat, so is your influence. If your tone is dead, your message dies with it. You don't need to cry. You don't need to scream, but you do need to care. And that care must be audible. If your message could be delivered by anyone, it's not yours yet. Find the line only you can say. The words that carry your story. The words you've said to yourself in your lowest moments. The ones that pulled you forward. When you give those words to others, they don't forget. And here's something else. Speak to elevate, not to entertain. People are drowning in clever. They're starving for clear. They're tired of empty talk. Tired of recycled advice. Tired of speakers who sound smart but say nothing. Be the voice that gives language to what they're feeling. That names what they haven't yet said. that breaks the fog with a single line of truth. Speak to their future, not their comfort. That one sentence alone can rewire someone, because comfort doesn't challenge. Comfort doesn't change. But the future needs a voice. Be that voice, and speak in a way that transfers energy. When you stop talking, what do people feel? Are they clearer, more grounded, more awake, or just impressed and unchanged? Every time you speak, you're planting seeds. And seeds don't need speeches. They need clarity. They need soil. They need to be dropped with intention and left to grow. Don't force it. Don't overtalk it. Say it. Let it land. Let the silence do the rest. That's the secret. You don't need more words. You need the right ones. You don't need better grammar. You need better standards. You don't need to be liked. You need to be clear. When you speak like that, your voice stays long after the room empties. That's when you stop being a speaker and start becoming a leader. Because leadership is not about saying everything. It's about saying the one thing that matters most. So ask yourself, what is the one sentence you want them to remember? Refine it, deliver it, and then step back. Because when you master that art, the art of speaking to be remembered, your words no longer need repetition. They echo, and that's the kind of voice we train next. Not just once in a while, but every day, because mastery isn't a moment, it's a muscle. A voice that leads doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's not a gift, it's a craft. And like any craft, it must be trained every day. Not just when the stakes are high, not just when the room is full, but especially when no one is watching. This is the discipline most people ignore. They want to sound strong when it matters, but they haven't prepared when it didn't. They want to speak with clarity in front of a crowd, but mumble through their mornings. They want to command a team, but trail off during small talk. What they don't realize is that every moment is training. Your voice isn't a performance. It's a reflection of your habits, your discipline, your inner structure. And if you don't train it, the pressure will expose you. Because pressure doesn't create skill, it reveals preparation. Leadership shows up when the moment finds you ready. And readiness is built one conversation at a time. Let's be clear, you don't train your voice on stage. You train it in the daily, unglamorous, forgettable moments. On the phone, in hallway check-ins, during a quick, "Hey, got a second?" Those moments build the muscle. You don't wait until the big pitch to refine your pace. You don't wait for conflict to practice steadiness. You train constantly. Just like athletes don't get strong by showing up on game day. They get strong by showing up when it's boring. Same with you. Every sentence is an opportunity. Every reply is a rep. So how do you train? Start with intention. Every time you open your mouth, do it on purpose. Don't speak from reflex. Speak from awareness. Ask, am I clear right now? Am I matching my tone to my message? Is what I'm about to say necessary? When you speak like it matters, even in small moments, your voice gains power. Because you're not just using it, you're shaping it. Second, practice precision. Cut the filler. Stop saying, like, you know. These aren't quirks. They're signals. They tell people you're unsure. They train you to be unsure. So eliminate them. Replace them with space. A pause says more than filler ever will. Third, pay attention to your pace. Fast talk is often fear in disguise. You rush because you're uncertain. You want to finish before someone interrupts. But fast is forgettable. Slow down. Control the rhythm. Let the words land. You're not trying to get through it. You're trying to give something with it. Fourth, mind your breath. Yes, your breath. Breath is the foundation of vocal strength. Shallow breath, shaky speech. Rushed breath, high pitch, tight delivery. But steady breath, grounded voice, calm delivery, deeper presence. Train yourself to breathe before you speak. before that call, before that tough conversation, before that meeting. Inhale, hold, exhale, speak. It's not about theatrics, it's about presence. When your breath is steady, your words carry calm authority, and people trust calm more than confidence. Fifth, rehearse. Not just content, but delivery. Record yourself. Listen back. Is your tone aligned? Are your words clear? Do you believe yourself? If not, revise. Train again. You're not doing this to sound perfect. You're doing this so that when the pressure shows up, your habits carry you. That's what discipline is. Training for when it matters. And don't underestimate the power of training in silence. Knowing when not to speak is just as important. Silence is a leadership tool. A pause commands more attention than a filler ever could. Stillness amplifies impact. So practice that too. Say what needs to be said, then stop. Let the quiet carry the weight. Also, don't just train your voice. Train your mind. Your voice will never be sharper than your thinking. So think in clear, strong statements. Simplify your mental clutter. Discipline your thoughts. Because your words follow your focus. And when your thoughts are organized, your voice flows like a river with a clear channel. This is how you speak naturally. Not because you're winging it, but because you've trained for it. You've put in the work. You've sharpened the edge. And now your voice cuts clean, without effort. But let's be honest. There will be days you don't feel strong. Days you're tired, foggy, frustrated. And that's when your training kicks in. You don't have to think about tone anymore. You've lived it. You don't second guess. You don't wobble. You speak, clear, grounded, focused, because you trained. And that's when people start following you, not because you asked them to, but because your presence pulls them. They don't know exactly what it is. They just know your voice has something. It feels safe. It feels sure. It feels like something they can trust. And trust is leadership's greatest currency. So build it. Daily, repetition, reflection, discipline. Speak clearly on purpose. Speak strongly under pressure. Speak with control in chaos. And speak like someone who's not trying to lead, someone who already does. Because that's the voice people follow. The one trained not in theory, but in real life. And once you've trained that voice, really trained it, it becomes more than sound. It becomes a force. It becomes presence. It becomes leadership. Natural, strong, and undeniable. And next, we'll take that presence and connect it to something even more magnetic. Lived experience. Because the only thing stronger than trained voice is a voice that speaks from scars. People can't always explain why they trust someone, but often it comes down to this. The person speaks from something real. Not theory, not borrowed knowledge, not surface-level wisdom, but from lived experience, from tested belief, from scars that became standards. That's why your voice, once trained, becomes unstoppable when it's aligned with your own life. Because people can feel when your words were earned. You're not repeating advice. You're revealing understanding. And that's what separates influence from noise. Anyone can study language. Anyone can learn speaking techniques. But when you speak from what you've lived, the words carry weight. They no longer sound like tips. They sound like truth. Not everyone needs a perfect speaker. They need a truthful one. When you say something that comes from pain or failure or breakthrough, your tone changes. You stop trying to convince. You start simply sharing, and people listen longer. Because they feel something behind the message. This is why your story matters. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's true. If you've ever lost your way and found your voice again, then speak from there. If you've ever failed so hard it redefined your standards, then speak from there. If you've ever been pushed to your breaking point but refused to break, then speak from there. Because no one forgets the voice that comes from survival. You don't need to package it. Just own it. You don't need to decorate it. Just deliver it. People are looking for something real to hold on to. And that realness lives in your own journey. You've been through things. Don't hide them. Don't polish them. Turn them into language that others can use. That doesn't mean trauma dumping. It means translating what you've learned into lines that lift others. It means turning your mess into mentorship, your wounds into wisdom. Because a leader's voice doesn't just speak truth. It transfers courage. That courage isn't built in books. It's built in fire. And when you speak from fire, others feel it. Think of Maya Angelou. She didn't read from a script. She spoke from her bones. Her rhythm wasn't rehearsed. It was rooted. And that's why her words didn't just reach ears. They reached generations. So ask yourself, what have I lived that could help someone move today? What sentence have I needed that I can now offer to others? What truth do I embody, not just talk about? That's your authority. That's your power. And when your voice is shaped by your scars, it becomes safe. Not soft, safe. People listen because they know you've been there. Because your advice comes from empathy, not ego. Because you've made it through the very thing they're walking into. And when you speak from that place, your tone slows, your words sharpen, your message settles. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply present. And presence, built from experience, is the most magnetic form of communication. Now here's the key. Your lived experience must align with your message. You can't speak discipline while living in chaos. You can't preach clarity while operating in confusion. You can't push for action while hiding from your own decisions. The more your life and your message match, the less effort it takes to lead. Your voice becomes a mirror of your standards, and people trust standards more than slogans. They may not agree with every word, but they'll respect the integrity of your voice, and respect creates influence that lasts. You won't need to sell your message. You'll simply embody it, and people will feel the difference. So start narrowing the gap. Let your message rise to match your example, or let your life rise to match your message. Either way, align. And once aligned, speak boldly. Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. You don't need to dramatize your life to make it valuable. You just need to share the lessons you've earned. And sometimes, that lesson is quiet, simple, small, but it's yours. And because of that, it has power. This is also why you don't need to compete with polished speakers. Let them perform. You speak from depth. You speak from what you know firsthand. You speak with calm force. And when you do, people lean in. Not because you sparkle, but because you resonate. Your presence says, I'm not just saying this. I live this. That's leadership. And that's when people stop seeing you as a voice and start seeing you as a guide. Not someone who's arrived, but someone who's walked and is still walking, with eyes open. So let your experience fuel your clarity. Let your truth sharpen your tone. Let your story form your sentence. Because the more grounded your voice becomes, the more natural your leadership will feel. It stops being something you try to do. It becomes who you are. And once that happens, the next shift is this. You start using silence, not just words, to lead. Because when your message is aligned, your presence alone starts speaking. And that's where we go next. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it. They talk over it. They see it as emptiness to be corrected. But leaders know better. They know silence is not absence, it's presence. They know that silence, when used intentionally, can speak louder than any words. Because in a noisy world, stillness is disruptive. It pulls attention. It holds space. It demands reflection. And when your voice is already grounded, when your message is clean, silence becomes your sharpest edge. Here's what silence can do. It gives your words room to breathe. You say something clear, and then stop. That pause, that's when the message sinks in. You don't clutter it with nervous chatter. You don't rush to prove more. You let it echo. A well-placed pause makes people feel the weight of what you just said. It also signals confidence. Weak voices race. They hurry through sentences, desperate to avoid dead air. Strong voices pause. They slow the pace. They trust the message. They trust the listener. Because a leader doesn't fear quiet. A leader owns it. Now think about moments in your life that hit the hardest. Chances are, they weren't loud. They were still. Still enough for truth to catch up to you. Silence is the hallway between the sentence and the decision. You don't always need to push harder. Sometimes you need to step back and let the message land. But silence is more than strategy. It's also discipline. It means knowing when not to speak. Sometimes the most powerful move is to say nothing. In a heated argument, in a high-pressure negotiation, in a moment when emotions are high and clarity is low, you breathe, you ground, you hold the moment. That kind of silence communicates more than a flood of defensive words ever could. It says, I'm not reactive. I'm in control. I speak when it matters, and that presence changes the atmosphere, because most people are uncomfortable with quiet. But when you're not, you stand apart. People lean into the stillness, waiting. You control the energy without controlling the people. That's influence at its purest. Let's look at another dimension of silence. Listening. Most think leadership is about talking, but real leadership listens, and not just to reply, to understand, to observe, to feel the unsaid. When you're silent, you can hear the emotional texture in a room. You can read beyond the words. You can notice what others miss. That awareness gives your next words surgical precision. You're not guessing. You're responding, intentionally, calmly, with direction. And sometimes, the silence itself is the message. You don't need to always respond. You don't need to fill every space. There's power in restraint. It shows self-trust. It shows strength. It shows choice. Silence also creates anticipation. When you pause before you speak, people prepare to listen. When you take a beat after you speak, people prepare to remember. It's like music. The rests are as important as the notes, because space creates impact. Without space, it's just noise. And don't mistake silence for passivity. Silence is active. You choose it, you shape it, you direct it, and when paired with clear language, silence becomes sacred. Think of Nelson Mandela. His tone was quiet, his cadence measured, his silences intentional. He didn't need to raise his voice to lead a nation. His stillness carried more weight than many people's shouting ever could. Because silence says, I'm not here to impress, I'm here to guide. And when people feel that, they trust you without knowing why. Your presence does the talking. And here's a practical truth. If you master silence, you speak less, but lead more. You stop needing to repeat yourself. You stop arguing for your message. You let the impact settle. And when others react, you respond. Not from impulse, but from intention. It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. You go from talking to be heard to speaking to be felt. You go from trying to sound smart to letting truth breathe. And in that space, your influence expands, not because you said more, but because your message had room. And this isn't just useful in formal settings. In your relationships, your meetings, your coaching, your daily conversations, use silence as a tool, not to withhold, but to hold presence, to let the other person process, to give yourself clarity, to create space for honesty. So here's your challenge. This week, speak 20% less. Use 20% more silence. Let it work for you. Let it amplify you. Let it distinguish you. Because when the world speeds up, the one who slows down becomes the one everyone watches. Not because of volume, but because of command. Command built from calm, from pause, from knowing that your presence speaks before your voice ever does. And the more you live that way, the more your voice becomes effortless. You'll stop trying to prove. You'll stop needing to chase attention. You'll walk into rooms with silence already working on your behalf. And when you do speak, it will matter, because you've earned the silence. And that prepares you for the final layer of vocal leadership, discipline as identity. Not a tool, not a trick, but a way of being. That's where we go next. Everything you've trained until now, Clarity, tone, presence, silence comes down to one word: discipline. Not the kind that feels rigid, not the kind that pushes you into burnout, but the kind that turns strength into second nature. The kind that makes a powerful voice your default state, not your occasional win. Discipline is what takes your voice from something you use to something you become. Because leadership doesn't live in the moment you say the right thing. It lives in the fact that you always do. Consistency, predictability, reliability. That's what makes people follow you without being asked. Your voice becomes trusted not because it's flashy, but because it doesn't fail. And here's the truth. Discipline doesn't mean being robotic. It means being intentional. It means owning your message, even on the days when it would be easier to be vague, passive, or invisible. Discipline means you say what you mean. You speak only when it matters. You don't collapse when the room resists. You don't ramble to feel comfortable. You don't seek validation through volume. It's not about sounding like a leader. It's about being one in every conversation. And being one starts with how you prepare. Great communicators don't wing it. They plan. They rehearse. They think deeply about what they stand for and how to say it clearly. They show up ready every time. Discipline is built in repetition. You don't become sharp by accident. You grind for it. And the grind isn't glamorous. It's refining your message while others are improvising. It's choosing silence instead of defending your ego. It's editing yourself mid-sentence when you catch a weak phrase trying to sneak in. It's training your pace, your tone, your posture again and again until people hear you and say, "There's something different about that voice." And there is. It's not louder. It's not smoother. It's anchored. It carries something other voices don't. Consistency. That consistency tells the room, I won't break. I won't wobble. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to lead, and they follow it. Not because of your content, but because of your command. Discipline shows up in your presence before it ever shows up in your words. It's the stillness you carry. The confidence that doesn't need announcement. The clarity that doesn't beg for approval. It's the alignment between what you say, how you say it, and who you are. And that kind of alignment, it's magnetic. People feel it before they understand it. They trust it before they can articulate it. They lean in because they sense they're in the presence of someone who means every word. And that sense doesn't come from technique. It comes from training, from habits, from hours of practicing when no one else was watching. And when everyone else is still reacting, still adjusting their tone to match the room, you stay the same. Because your voice doesn't chase moods. It carries mission, and that's the difference. Discipline also means holding back. You don't always say what you feel. You don't always respond when provoked. You don't always explain what doesn't need explanation. You choose your words. You protect your message. You respect your influence enough not to waste it. Because when you've trained your voice, you know, some things are better said once. Some truths don't need defense. Some moments are best led through silence. And most of all, you know that every sentence has a cost. The more you speak, the more you ask for someone's attention. And attention is earned, not assumed, so you spend it wisely. And that wisdom, that discipline, makes your voice powerful even when you're not speaking. It becomes presence, reputation, legacy. And here's where it all lands. You train so hard that one day you don't think about it anymore. You just speak. You just show up. You just lead because the habits are in place. The thinking is clear. The message is lived, not learned. And the voice? It is you. No performance, no character. Just presence. Just command. Just real leadership. One sentence at a time. So now we arrive at the place where the voice becomes more than speech. It becomes a force. A voice that is no longer shaped by reaction. A voice that no longer reaches for attention. A voice that speaks because it knows who it is. This isn't the voice you had at the beginning. It's the voice you built. It's the product of clarity, sharpened by purpose, of tone, molded by control. of message, refined by real experience, of silence, practiced with intent, of discipline, etched into habit. This voice does not arrive overnight. It grows in the background, in repetition, in deliberate choices. Every sentence you rewrote, every hesitation you removed, every breath you slowed, every conversation you took seriously, all of it led here. And now, when you speak, it lands. Not because of volume, but because of presence. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to overtalk to lead. You don't have to impress to impact. You've trained your voice to do what few others can. Say something clear. Say something real. Say something that stays. And that voice, your voice, is leadership. Not someday. Now. You don't need a new opportunity to use it. You need to choose it. Over and over again. Choose strength. Choose stillness. Choose clarity. Choose restraint. Choose truth. That's the voice people will follow. Because when everything around them feels unstable, the one who speaks with discipline, conviction, and focus becomes the one they trust. Not the loudest, the clearest. Not the fanciest, the most grounded. Not the performer, the guide. And now that guide is you. So go speak like every word matters, because it does. Speak like people are listening, because they are. Speak like someone who leads, because you do. One sentence, one conversation, one shift at a time. That's how real leadership is built. That's what your voice was made for.